闇を欺いて切な丘をして
とっておきのやつだ
目指す人間や
逃げるんだよ
気をつけ貫いた想いが未来を開く Like a burning stone 熱く Like a burning stone 血脈に刻まれた因縁に浮き上がる消えない誇りの絆握りしめて
Dead Cells is a deceptive game. The premise of this game is simple, but there's so much depth and game mechanics involved that can be taken for granted when trying to kill monsters and finish a course quickly. So sit down tight, because this will take a while. The execution of the pixel art style is stunning. Level designs can really set the mood of the game, because they are both breathtaking and intimidating. Monster designs are daunting. Weapon designs are unique, so it's easy to memorize which weapon types are which and how they work, though the text description on equipment provides sufficient information. Dead Cells easily runs at 60 FPS, providing smooth animations, which are done well enough to sell the idea of feeling swift, brutal, and powerful. The music also helps in creating fast-paced and suspenseful moments in a session. There will be different reasons to quickly advance to the next area, whether because players want to clear a playthrough as fast as possible, or health and flasks need to be replenished, so it helps when the soundtrack adds that dramatic flair in a session. Mixing these elements together, Motion Twin, the developer of Dead Cells, created a vibrant, dark, brutal, and grim experience. Motion Twin advertises the game as a roguelite Metroidvania, or as they refer to it, a Roguevania, with elements of Dark Souls. When glancing at it as a whole, Dead Cells has the aesthetics of Dark Souls, and the main currency to gain upgrades is similar to Dark Souls, but there are no other distinguishable mechanics that make Dead Cells similar to Dark Souls. As mentioned earlier, Dead Cells is a Roguevania. The game has different sections in one level that can only be overcome with certain abilities. Playthroughs change as more abilities and upgrades are acquired, usually from either getting better gear or entering a new level. Combat is fast-paced, but it doesn't excuse reckless behavior. If players die, they have to restart from the beginning of the session. Despite that, restarting isn't a chore, as weapons unlocked can be found early in the playthrough, giving powerful boosts. A timer is also shown in the game's UI, encouraging players to complete the entire course even faster, especially with some elements being affected by how fast the session is traversed. A game can be paused and exited at any point, saving all progress until the point at which the game is exited, which is useful when breaks are needed. Levels are procedurally generated, but they often follow a general design format for easier adaptation. Dead Cells has players explore areas known as biomes. A game always starts in the prison quarters. After that, there are at least 2 biomes that have to be traversed before reaching the first boss, another 2 biomes before reaching the second boss, and 1 final biome before reaching the last boss. Each non-boss level will have different obstacles to overcome, with some exclusive to certain biomes. Most monsters appear in all levels, while others are exclusive to certain biomes, but they all become stronger as players go further, requiring preparation to handle the difficulty. Waypoints are enabled upon encounter. These can be used to travel to explored sections of a level, allowing fast but complete clears, as well as the ability to proceed to the desired biome. Shops are scattered throughout levels, selling up to 3 items. Giant chests can also be found throughout these levels, granting new items and cells. Every once in a while though, the chest can be full of monsters, ready to ambush at a moment's notice. Timed doors also appear in different levels as well. These doors remain open for a certain time throughout an entire game, but offer cells, gold, and a power-up scroll if found in time, incentivizing speedrunning. Challenge rifts can also be found throughout biomes, offering a gigantic chest with loot, but at the price of having to finish an obstacle course in order to exit the rift. Cursed chests occasionally appear, offering a cursed item, as well as placing a curse on the player unless they clear a mini-objective. Once players exit a biome, they're taken to a prelude area where they must use all of their collected cells for crafting, select a mutation to use, and then restore their health and flasks, until finally proceeding to the entrance of the next biome. Additional upgrades are accessible once bosses are defeated. A common NPC that can be talked to in prelude areas after a boss fight can improve the rarity of items found with enough cells invested, making the opportunity to find desirable equipment easier. While biomes cannot be memorized, they are designed in a way that adaptation comes naturally to the player, allowing them to get used to these roguelike elements. Meanwhile, combat offers a fast-paced, aggressive, and thoughtful experience as well. 4 buttons are assigned for attacks using the 2 weapons and 2 skills equipped. Weapons are melee or ranged weapons and shields that are used to fight enemies and often have a short delay in their attack animations depending on the weapon. Skills range from grenades, traps, and powers that can be thrown out in a fight, but can't be used again for several seconds. Mutations, on the other hand, give buffs to players. Only up to 3 mutations can be equipped at a given session, and gold must be spent to remove all mutations and equip new ones. Decisions have to be made carefully, as some mutations can only be used before starting the second area. Items have normal variants and legendary variants. Items will have different affixes regardless, but legendary items have constant affixes as well as a random affix exclusive to that rarity. All of these affixes have their uses, but some affixes have interactions with other affixes, equipment, and even environments that the effects are cancelled out, making in-game knowledge even more important. 2 mobility options are accessible in dead cells: jumping and rolling. Jumping helps players reach high-level platforms as well as reach across gaps. Jumping mid-air can also be performed for more maneuvering, whether to jump higher, farther, or even in the opposite direction. While mid-air, dive attacks can be performed by pressing the down button and jump button simultaneously. Monsters close to the player after landing with a dive attack will be stunned, allowing for faster kills. Rolling, as implied, moves the character forward with a rolling animation. The animation makes the character smaller, allowing it to access walls that have small holes at their bottoms. The roll provides invincibility in a few frames, making it useful to avoid attacks in combat with the opportunity to counterattack after the forward movement. Rolls have a set distance, and can't be used again until a short time, so caution must be taken when using the maneuver. Wielding a combination of ranged and melee weapons is the most beginner-friendly setup. This allows players to fight at different ranges, all the while learning how to roll to avoid danger. Having a shield with either a ranged or melee weapon and a loadout can potentially limit how battles are fought, but offer great rewards when used properly. Shields not only have the ability of absorbing a given amount of damage by holding the shield button, but they also offer the ability to parry attacks with the press of a button. By parrying a non-shockwave attack, either the attack animation of an enemy is cancelled or a projectile is deflected to the source, both outcomes resulting in a stun when the parry is successful or the projectile hits an enemy. There are 6 notable status ailments in the game. 3 of them, burn, poison, and bleeding, deal damage over time, while the other 3, stun, freeze, and immobilize, limit enemy action. Burn deals fire damage and can be enhanced when enemies are doused in flammable oil. Note, however, that enemies standing in water are not affected by burn, thus players must be wary of enemy locations. Poison, as the name implies, deals poison damage. Toxic clouds are the easiest way to poison mobs, especially since they cover a portion of a section. Bleeding can only be caused by inflicting damage with weapons, making it the most limited compared to other status effects. All damage over time effects can be stacked with their respective statuses and other statuses as well, meaning that an enemy can have multiple stacks of bleeding effects and poison effects simultaneously. Having a combination of at least 2 of these ailments provide a huge boost in damage, especially since some equipment can improve damage output while these ailments are in effect. Stun temporarily keeps an enemy incapacitated. As mentioned earlier, the most consistent way to cause a stun is by parrying attacks, making shields a strong option in a loadout. Players can also be stunned if they fall from high platforms. Thankfully, dive attacks can be used even while falling, nullifying the chance to be stunned at all. Freeze is similar to stun, but leaves enemies in a thawing state once freezing ends, making them move slowly. Applying damage over time on frozen enemies nullifies the frozen status, even reducing the effects of thawing with each tick of damage. Immobilize prevents mobs from moving. While immobilized, they can still attack, making this effect best used when fighting with ranged weapons. Flasks can be used in a biome by holding the flask button, but their use is limited within that biome. Flasks restore 60% of the maximum health, but the character must stand still in order to consume one. As mentioned earlier, the only way to restore flasks is to exit the biome. Due to the restrictions on flask use, it is recommended to always be on the lookout for other sources of healing. Some mutations can restore small amounts of health after performing certain actions. Food is also scattered in different sections of levels from time to time that restore a certain percentage of health. Healing is also possible in combat without any mutations or flasks. When damage is taken, there is a part of the health bar that is highlighted in yellow. While that section is present, any damage dealt by the player restores a small amount of health within that yellow section. The duration period of that yellow bar isn't long, forcing players to hastily proceed to the next enemy to fight. It is evident through the combat system that Dead Cells plays nothing like Dark Souls. One can argue that there are many elements in Dead Cells that are similar to Dark Souls, but the pacing and combat mechanics are what define a Souls game. The main factor that affected the gameplay of Dark Souls was the stamina bar. This is because the stamina bar governs the movement options and attacks that can be performed, integrating careful decision-making in midst of combat. Attacks throughout the Souls franchise also have long recovery periods, requiring a presence of mind and pattern analysis in fights. Attacks and skills in Dead Cells have recovery periods, but aggression is what drives combat rather than caution, which is even more evident when attack animations can be cancelled, the very antithesis of Dark Souls combat. This is important to bring up because it can be potentially misleading to consumers, especially avid fans of the Souls franchise. One must always be wary of throwing out statements that a game is similar to Dark Souls, especially if the only criteria is difficulty, as there are many games predating Dark Souls that have difficult gameplay. Regardless, combat is simple, fast-paced, but in-depth as well. Experimentation is invited and customization is plentiful. To top it off, there are myriads of ways to survive, provided that those mechanics are understood properly. Dead Cells though is roguelike, so it'll need a progression system to ensure that improvements are noticeable even with its repetitive nature. Weapons, skills, and mutations usually fall under three categories: brutality, tactics, and survival. The majority of melee weapons and grenades fall under the brutality category. Meanwhile, the majority of ranged weapons and traps fall under the tactics category. And finally, all shields fall under the survival category. Some weapons have a combination of two colors or are colorless, which allows equipment to become stronger based on the highest stat level. A broadsword, for example, falls under both the brutality and survival category. If the survival stat has a higher level than the brutality stat, then the weapon damage will scale with the former. Said scrolls also improve categorized mutations and increase the maximum health pool. The incremental health percentage decreases as the level of a stat increases, mostly because the health pool is increased multiplicatively, so other stats should be powered up for maximum health. As monsters die, they can drop cells and blueprints. Cells are used to acquire different upgrades, ranging from weaponry that can be used once the blueprint is completed, or permanent upgrades, such as increasing the amount of flasks that can be used, or getting a random shield rather than the standard basic shield when starting a session. Some blueprints aren't just found from random monsters, but in different sections of the biomes as well, forcing the exploration of every nook and cranny of a biome to craft new weapons to try them out. Blueprints picked up must be given to the cell vendor, which can only be done by advancing to the next area. If a player dies while holding a blueprint, the blueprint is dropped and it must be picked up in the next game. Some upgrades are locked unless more upgrades are completed, ensuring that progression is distributed in various aspects. Equipment acquired from crafting are given immediately and equipable. The crafting system assures improvement even when players must start from the very beginning of the game. And the more upgrades acquired, the easier it is to run through levels. Depending on how the game is explored, runes can be unlocked after defeating an elite that was in a room of a certain stage. These runes give new ways to traverse through sections. The vine rune causes any interacted moss on the floor to grow into gigantic vines that can be climbed on. The teleportation rune allows players to teleport to different parts of a stage by interacting with any red statue. The Bellier's rune provides a dive attack the capability to break through any floor with a red marking on it, stunning any monsters in the area beneath upon landing. The Spider's rune offers wall climbing. When a player advances upward on a wall, they run upward at a certain distance and can only move on by either jumping upward or running to the opposite wall. Acquiring these runes change the way the game is played, because they can be used to access sections of the stage that either have equipment placed there or exits to new biomes. Overall, progression is designed in a way that strength becomes noticeable in repeated playthroughs. Some people though would like to see how well they fare when compared to other people in a fixed setting, so Motion Twin decided to add a daily challenge mode in the game. Challenge mode is unlocked after killing the boss in the Black Bridge. Once unlocked, this can be accessed anytime in the main menu provided there's internet connection. The entire map is revealed and the pathways of a level, as well as the equipment that can be found, stay constant until the challenge changes in the next day. A countdown timer is set in place to force out fast clears. Killing monsters provide points that are added to an overall score after the challenge is done. Power-up scrolls automatically improve all three stats, to remove any decision-making to allow players to focus on the objective at hand. The challenge is cleared when the boss of the challenge is killed. Failing a challenge still places players in a leaderboard, but players place better if the challenge was cleared. Clearing challenges regularly also affect normal play sessions, because some blueprints can only be unlocked by clearing a number of challenges, rewarding those who push hard enough in completing challenges. Challenge mode is great for anyone who wants to do a quick game and not have to worry much about deciding how they want to clear the game. That said, others might find both the normal game and challenge mode a bit boring. Thankfully, Motion Twin has added modding in the PC version during the game's early access state. As of this recording, it's hard to say whether mod support is available on consoles, but judging from the lack of mod support in many console games due to the architecture in the consoles, as well as the fact that mod support was added months before the full launch of Dead Cells, it's most likely that mod support isn't present on the console versions. Mod support on the PC has to be enabled in the settings menu, and to install a mod, the playthrough has to be restarted. So players must be sure they are at the starting area of the session to be certain that no progress is lost. The current library of mods range from balance adjustments to adding gear that can be dropped to aesthetics. In the case of balance adjustments, it is highly recommended to run a normal playthrough as many times as possible to understand what playstyles are the most enjoyable and what issues could be encountered. That said, one recommended mod to increase the difficulty even more is the Double Cells mod. This mod increases the number of monsters in a map and make them stronger, but rewarding players with double the cells drop rate. The modder has since then made different iterations of this mod to further increase the difficulty for those interested. The base game is already enjoyable as is, and the mods available improve the experience even further. I have to say, I love Dead Cells. Playing more and more to get an honest opinion about it has been one hell of a blast. It's a fun game. It's easy to explore and maneuver around biomes. Combat is frantic and brutal. Equipment in the game is interesting and useful. Progression is noticeable in multiple playthroughs. And to top it off, mod support is present in the PC version. The game is available digitally for $25. Pricey when compared to the content available, but a worthy purchase nonetheless. Thank you all again for taking the time to listen. I was caught up with other stuff, and I wanted to make sure that this review came out as nice as possible. I hope you'll tune in to my channel as I have at least 2 games in mind that I want to work on. Until then, I'll bid you all adieu.